How was your overall experience, and how do you think this is going to contribute to our national agricultural priorities? Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle, for the kind invitation, and of course the organizers being LightCastle and the Sustainable Agriculture Foundation itself. I think the concept of agriculture is very basic to the whole human nature itself, because it is so fundamental, a very key part of our survival itself. But as you can see, this ties in very closely to the overall climate change that's impacting on us. I think climate change brings with it the challenges in terms of how agriculture can be conducted successfully. But I think there's also other questions that come into play. What I want to say is that I need to congratulate the organizers, being LightCastle and SAF itself, for coming up with an event of this form, because it is going to be, I think, the first of its many in time to come, and also getting the regulators and the government involved so that we could drive some messages across to them, and also placing the importance of advocacy in the role itself.
Right. That brings me to my next question. If I shift gears a bit, from an investment perspective, how do you think such dialogue in Bangladesh can bring in international investors or grab attention of the right audience in the international scene?
Well, I think financing in the agriculture space, maybe to some is unique or maybe difficult, but if you ask me, it probably is no different from an example that I was raising with some of the participants earlier on in relation to e-commerce. Some of us who are involved in the trade of commodities or agriculture itself are confronted with the challenge of not being able to export. And I think that difficulties in terms of exporting itself come fundamentally from the overall understanding of what is the future price. I think this itself lends weight to the fact that if one wants to go further in the whole agriculture space, I think a very mature marketplace could be developed, from my humble opinion. There's also other kinds of funding that could look at in view of perhaps certain legislations that are not in place in Bangladesh, but things like tokenization and leveraging on financing from DeFi could be things that one could look at. And I think those things should be perhaps inspected in tandem with some of the other challenges that we are talking about.
Right. Interesting insights. I'll just have one more question, which is Singapore is known to be a startup hub, right? So how do you think our Bangladeshi agri-startups can pick up from the technologies that were mentioned here? What kind of supports do they need to scale up or use these kind of technologies to scale up their startups? Over to you.
Sure, I think that's an interesting question. In fact, I was having a similar conversation with a colleague in the office yesterday. Well, I think Singapore, it becomes the natural capital that one looks at, but I thought of drawing other examples in place, and hopefully, LightCastle and 013 and in IWise could look into this much later. 013, as you may have heard when I shared earlier on, was born out of a startup environment in a regulatory sandbox in Seychelles. And Seychelles, being a very small country, has also earned the respect of the environmentalists, because the very facility 013 was actually placed for competition in the Tech Spring Award at the COP28, which came up with the best prize for blockchain.
Exactly.
All these things have helped us because personally my work also involved with the UN SCAP in Maldives, and we are building a similar kind of a startup environment, a innovation hub over there. And what you just said, I think, lends weight to the fact that perhaps Bangladesh should not just look at Singapore. Not that there's anything, I'm a Singaporean, I feel proud about it, but there could be, again, things that you can look at which has further similarities in terms of agriculture, fisheries, which probably will be much more difficult to accept in places like Singapore.